War in Stellaris is fought by your fleets, which are made up of ships, which are made up of individual components. You can leave the ship auto builder on and throw a bunch of random ships into your fleets and hope for the best, or you can watch this video and find out exactly what ships you want to be building and how many of them to put into your fleets. Before we get into the actual shipbuilding, you need to get the most exciting part out of the way and learn what all these stats mean. Build time, upkeep and cost are pretty obvious, I'm going to trust you can work those ones out. Power is what's required to, well, power everything on your ships. You must at least break even with this for the design to be valid, and having some surplus gives a small bonus to evasion, speed and weapon damage by using some super complicated looking maths that breaks down to something like 0.001% bonus for every 1 surplus power. What I'm getting at is, unless you're going to have like thousands of spare power, it's probably not worth worrying about this as long as you're in the green. Health is then separated into 3 areas. Hull is the actual HP of the ship, so if this reaches 0, you're gone. Armor goes on top of hull, and shields go on top of armor. Now you might think this means you can build tons of shield and armor and be unkillable, but different weapons can do different damage to the different HP bars, and some can completely bypass shields and armor, so it's best to have this somewhat balanced and have hull be your biggest by far if possible. Evasion is basically the ship's chance to dodge damage thrown their way. Speed is obviously how fast the ship can move inside of a system. Damage is the ship's average damage per second, which is calculated from all their weapons and damage fire rates. Again, this is a little bit redundant since different weapons do different damage to different HP bars, so I won't worry too much about this. And finally, special values are any special effects the ship has, such as piracy, suppression, sensor range, and anything else that is a little bonus effect aside from the standard things their ship already does. Components are what make up everything on your ship, and there are a lot of them, but to make things marginally easier, they're separated into different categories. First of all, weapons. Most standard weapons like autocannons or lasers come in 3 sizes: small, medium or large, represented by S, M or L. The bigger the weapon, generally, the more damage at the cost of worse tracking, which basically means they have worse accuracy. Bigger weapons are normally better versus bigger ships and stations, since they can't really evade, and smaller weapons are better versus smaller and faster targets like enemy frigates. Also, this goes for all weapons, but there are certain weapon types that are better versus certain HP types. You can see how each weapon will perform versus different bars by hovering over the module size icon, so just have a read before you pick. You also have X or extra large slots, which can only fit in massive weapons that deal huge damage but have terrible tracking. G components are guided weapons that cannot miss once fired, but are vulnerable to being destroyed by point defense. Speaking of which, P is point defense. These are small weapons which are more defensive than offensive. They're used to destroy incoming guided weaponry and strike craft, protecting your fleet from potentially high damage such as torpedoes. H are hangars, which allow larger ships to launch tiny fighters to do damage for them. These are basically impossible to get rid of without flak point defense, and are excellent versus smaller ships since they have near perfect tracking. T or Titanic weapons are weapons that can only be used by Titans and normally one-shot most other ships if they land a direct hit. They sport insane damage but equally an insane cooldown time, so you better pray that they don't miss. And finally, W or World Devastator weapons are only available on Colossus ships and do what they say on the tin. Against other ships, they won't really do much, but against planets, they devastate. There's a few of these to choose from depending on your empire and its rules and ethics and all that stuff, but one way or another, they take that planet out of the game at least for the time being. Now the other size-based components are utilities. S, M and L are the same small, medium, large sizes from the weapons, and the same logic applies. The bigger the components, the bigger bonuses at the cost of more power usage. Your options for these utilities are armor or shields, so they'll be making your ships tougher versus different forms of damage. A or auxiliary utilities are kind of your miscellaneous ship buffs like automatic repairing, more power capacity, and modifies to different HP bars. And finally, we have these components on the right, and each of these house a unique type of item. First, you have your reactor, which determines your ship's power capacity baseline. Your sensors will determine how much of the local system the ship can see, as well as how many jumps away they can gather intel. The combat computer can do many things, such as increase fire rate, range, and tracking. The jump drive determines the charge time for FTL jumps. Thrusters determine the ship's movement speed in the local system. And Titans and Juggernauts have auras, which buff or debuff nearby allied and hostile ships. So now you know the stats and components, we can actually talk about what parts make up a ship and how to choose the right ones. So, every ship in the game fits into one of 9 sizes. You have these 7 fleet ship sizes and 2 defensive ship sizes for use in star bases. Each of these sizes is made up of at least one part, and within these parts you fit your components. This sounds really overwhelming, but it's not that bad. You basically just click at the top and select from one of the parts there based on what components you want to use. So if we want to make a new Corvette, we have the choice of 2 sections to use for the main body. You can see what slots are available on each section, so choose one that fits your needs. If you're going all out damage and aren't worried about missiles or strike craft, we can go Interceptor. Otherwise, the picket ship will be the way to go for point defense, get rid of those guided weapons and small crafts. For large ships, there'll be more sections to choose from, but the principle is the exact same, of picking parts so you have room for your desired components. Now you might be wondering what the best parts are, and as with most things in life, there is no single right answer. To start off with, you need to know what your ships will be fighting against, and to do that, you need intel. If you have intel of an enemy fleet, you'll be able to click on the little magnifying glass and look at the details of every ship in their fleet and see what weapons they're using, what HP types they have, and all the rest of their components. In this example, we're going to use the Grand Dragon class Ether Drake, which is one of those big spooky cosmic monsters. These sorts of enemies are really easy to build for, since it's a 1 unit army, so you'll only need to remember 1 load of stats. As you can see, it has a crap load of hull and armor, but no shield, so any weapons that are shield focused are going to be a waste of time. It also doesn't have a ton of evasion, so we don't really need to worry too badly about that. So for damaging this, good picks would be laser, plasma, phase disruptors, missiles, and graviton torpedoes, since all these will do great versus armor and hull when there are no shields in the way. Looking at all of its weapons, they deal less damage to shields, so the more of those we can get on our ships, the better. So now we just go through and make ships in each size that work well against this specific target, being sure to give them a name which clearly indicates what they're good at, because if you have a lot of ship templates, this can get pretty confusing, so you're going to want a good naming convention. So now we have all of our ships ready, we need to actually put them in a fleet, and that means choosing how many of each ship size we want, and again, there's not really a right answer for this. Going back to our Drake, his weapons have a decent mix of high and low tracking, making it a threat to both large and small ships, so bringing a mix would probably be the best way to go. Generally, you want to have more of these smaller ships and fewer of the large ships, and this is for a few reasons. First of all, the smaller ships are harder to take out, especially as you get into the late game and enemies have large ships with worse tracking. They're also cheaper to build and replace if you do lose any, so they aren't as much of a drain on your economy. Something like what I've got here is a decent mix, as you're getting a few ships of every size, so you'll be ready for whatever you come up against. Also, be sure to give your fleets admirals. They can get some great skills and will only make ships more powerful, so if you're serious about them fighting, then make full use of them. So now we've got our fleet and our specialized ships, and we simply get them into combat. Yes, the Drake isn't the best example since it's very focused on one thing, but you get the idea. If you have intel of an enemy, you can see what ships they have and what they have on those ships and build your own ships and fleets accordingly. If you don't have full intel, you'll just have to work with whatever info you've got and do your best to build something that will work well versus most enemies and hope for the best. Finally, if you're going to be attacking stations, you don't even need intel since every empire in the game has these same stations, so just look at your own to know what you'll be up against. So now you know everything that you need to build your own ships and fleets, why not check out this video here where I go over how to have a strong economy in game so that you can build those fleets and not run out of money whilst doing it.